Trust for real journalism, fair and balanced, the Fox News Channel.
Hi, I'm Bill O'Reilly reporting tonight from Los Angeles. Thanks for watching us. Who has the moral high ground in the Iraq debate? That is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. As you know, both sides in the debate are saying God is on their side. Those who favor peace point to the Pope, calling the war immoral. And those who favor the removal of an evil man, Saddam, say they are protecting lives by that action. In this case, I think both sides are wrong. Nobody knows for sure what the absolute right thing to do is. We can only have opinions. Thus, it is intellectually dishonest to be claiming God is on your side when only God knows for sure what the right thing to do is. Talking Points bases its support of military action against Saddam on one overwhelming fact, and note the word fact. According to the United Nations, Saddam has refused to account for 8,500 liters of anthrax, as well as 31,000 other chemical munitions. Again, that's according to the UN. Faced with that fact, it is dangerous to allow an evil dictator to remain in power. Now, if you want a chance that Saddam would never use those deadly weapons, that is your right in a free society, and I respect that right. But I don't want a chance that. In the wake of 9/11 and after the United Nations has demanded 18 times that Saddam give up his weapons, again, I don't want to take the chance. And international law is on my side. In an absolutely disgraceful column today, Los Angeles Times writer Robert Scheer says the United States will join the ranks of, quote, war criminals, unquote, if we attack Iraq. Scheer is perhaps the most radical journalist writing in a major newspaper today, and his moral indignation and blatant anti-Americanism is revolting. On the same page as Scheer's column is another commentary by Elie Wiesel, the Holocaust survivor. He says, quote, the nightmarish question of what Saddam might do with his arsenal of unconventional weaponry is why, more than ever, some of us believe in intervention. What it comes down to is this. We have a moral obligation to intervene where evil is in control. Today, that place is Iraq. Now, I believe Mr. Wiesel is basing his analysis on what's best for the world, and Mr. Scheer is basing his analysis on his hatred of the Bush administration. In the end, Saddam will be removed from power, and the world will be a better place. And I hope God approves of that. And that's a memo. Now for the top story tonight, another view of the moral question involving Iraq. Joining us now from Washington is Carl Canetta, director of the Project on Defense Alternatives. Mr. Canetta, where am I going wrong here?
I think the principal issue here is whether war is necessary to accomplish the objective of guaranteeing our security. I think that you exaggerate the amount of munitions that the UN says are unaccounted for.
Well, hold it. Now, how could I exaggerate when the UN has it right here? All right, I have the report right here. How could I exaggerate? They did the count, not me.
The United Nations does not say that he has 31,000 munitions. What the United Nations says is that a large number of munitions are unaccounted for.
Wrong.
Blix makes quite
what
clear.
They said is when they got booted out of there in '98, and that's absolutely wrong, Mr. Canetta. And you,
no,
I'm correcting you right now on the record, sir. All right? Listen to me.
You're correcting me incorrectly.
No, I'm not.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Right here in black and white. When the UN inspectors left in '98, there were 8,500 liters of anthrax unaccounted for. Are you disputing that, sir?
I'm not disputing it. What I'm talking about is what do they mean by the phrase unaccounted for? They do not mean that they know that it exists. And Blix is very clear about this.
Right.
What he's clear about is the following, that when they say unaccounted for, they mean that Iraq has not brought forward adequate evidence and documentation for weapons that it says it has destroyed. No one to date has found significant amounts of these weapons in Iraq.
That's impossible to do, as you know. Now, wait a minute. So this is great. I love this. This is parsing, and this is what you guys do for a living. So you, as an American, you have a family, sir? You have a family?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yes.
You are willing to give Saddam Hussein the benefit of the doubt?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. In fact, I think it is important to intervene, and in fact, we are intervening presently in a very effective way. We've been able to draw down his weapon stocks over the past decade by at least 59,000 munitions.
All right, so you believe that Hans Blix can find 8,500 liters of anthrax. You believe that, sir?
I believe that if the inspections continue with the assistance of U.S. intelligence and the intelligence of other nations, that we can prevent them from having an effective capability. Yes, that presently their capability
All right, so
is
no, you
completely
flat out
disrupted.
believe that Hans Blix and his guys can find this anthrax. You believe that, when every expert in the world says
that
it's impossible. It's impossible in a place the size of California to find 8,500 liters of anthrax. Can't be done unless some scientist in Iraq says there it is.
It's certainly true that you cannot close the uncertainty gap here.
Okay.
That there is always the possibility that some elements of this program will exist somewhere in Iraq. As long as we maintain the inspections, as long as we maintain our own watch on Iraq, their ability to put it all together into an effective program will be disrupted.
All right. Now, again, this is just startling to me, and I'm saying this with all due respect because millions of Americans believe the way that you do. 60% believe the way that I do. 40% believe the way that you do. You are willing to put the safety of your family and the safety of this country in the hands of weapons inspectors from the United Nations when you know that anthrax and other chemical munitions and biological agents are almost impossible to find in an area the size of that country unless you had an informer tell you where they were. So you're willing to do that, and I'm saying to myself, why? Why, sir? If 18 times the United Nations told this guy to account for those weapons, and 18 times he has not, why do you want to give him more time? For what reason on this earth?
Well, the question is, what is the sanction that is in play? What is the alternative that people are talking about? And the alternative is war, which itself is an instrument of mass destruction. Thousands of people will die. We will enter a period of chaos, and all of that fire will be drawn to the United States.
All right, let me ask you this question.
There are a lot of options. There are
there aren't a lot of options.
Doing
It's just
nothing.
It's war or inspections. There are only two options. That's it.
That's not right.
Now, if you, yes, of course it is.
It's not right.
If you were in a position that you are now as president of an organization in the year 1938, and you saw all of the violations of the Treaty of Versailles that Hitler did, and you saw what he was, his history, his track record of violence, and Neville Chamberlain came to you and said, look, we can contain this guy by signing another treaty with him, you would have done the exact same thing, sir? No
question. Take him out.
No, why? Whoa. What's the difference then?
Hitler.
It's not Hitler. What's the difference?
In 1938, Germany led the world in military expenditures. It was already a military superpower. Obvious to anyone who cared to look that it was heading toward a massive offensive. That's not the case with Iraq at this time.
All right, no, let me stop you. Let me stop you.
We have Iraq. We have them effectively in a box.
All right. Well, in your opinion, we have them in a box, but there was anthrax attacks after 9/11. It was done by one or two individuals very crudely, and I'm not confident of that box at all. Now, you say that it was overwhelming. It was overwhelmingly obvious, and it wasn't overwhelmingly obvious to millions of people in the 30s. But I'll tell you this: Saddam Hussein is the largest army in the Middle East. All right. He has developed these weapons for no purpose. He doesn't need them defensively. All right. He doesn't need them at all. He's used them, as you know. All right. And he's invaded 2 other countries. But this isn't enough for you to have him removed. You're comfortable with him being there. I'll give you the last word.
Yes, you're talking about a history that ended in 1991. You're talking about an Iraq that no longer exists. Iraq's military capability has been largely dispersed since that period. It is perhaps 1/3 as powerful as it was, and in terms of its chemical weapons and other weapons of mass destruction, these are no longer effectively part of their military capability. We were able to deter their use back in 1991, and the power that we had at that time has been tripled since then. In the final analysis, our security derives from our ability to deal to them in great multiples.
All right,
with
Mr. Canetta,
whatever they could do to us.
I respect your opinion. I think you're dead wrong. I don't think that there's any reason on this earth that that man should remain in power after all the things that he's done and all of the UN weapons violations that he has thumbed his nose at the world. But we respect you for coming on. Thank you, Mr. Canetta. Next on the rundown, Dick Morris, just back from France. We'll debrief him. And then later on, the attorney for Michael Jackson's family will be here to set us straight. Those reports upcoming.
Talking Points is brought to you by Saturn, makers of the
In the personal story segment tonight, our pal Dick Morris, just back from France, where he spoke to the French Council on Foreign Relations. Wow! Mr. Morris, Fox News analyst, joins us now from New York. You think you're going to invite me over to speak to that?
Well, I let him have it, Bill.
Oh, you did?
I stood up there and I said there were 5 guys from the Council on from the Foreign Ministry there. And I stood up and I said, you are suffering from national amnesia. You have forgotten the 2 countries that bailed you out and allied yourself with a country that invaded you twice and another one that threatened you for 50 years. And I told them, I said that if you veto this resolution, that'll be the last veto you ever cast, that the Security Council will go the way of the General Assembly. It'll be an international joke. And you're killing the veto. I said, we don't need the UN, you do, and you're killing it.
And what did they say to you?
Well, they sputtered. The question period was more like a firefight. They stood up and one German guy raised his hand when I was describing the sense of betrayal that Americans felt after 9/11 of these countries running out on us. And he said, you're describing the American people as behaving irrationally. And I said, well, to give you a feeling of how we're behaving, think about how the people of Berlin behaved in 1948 when Russia imposed an embargo and the United States supplied you over the blockade with our air power. Unfortunately, you are not helping us now.
Now, as Mr. Canetta said in our opening segment, these people do not believe Saddam Hussein is a threat to them, to the world.
Well,
now they're turning away from the facts. I think I presented enough.
Well, I think France has made darn sure that they're not a threat to France by adopting this appeasement line.
Absolutely.
And it's the same thing they did in the 30s, and it didn't work then. It's not going to work now.
But it is going to work in the short term because al-Qaeda or any other fanatical terrorist would be insane to attack France, their primary terrorism defender. And I'm not saying that they're defending al-Qaeda. I'm saying by putting themselves between the United States and Saddam Hussein, the Arab world would be crazy to attack them, and therefore they're ensuring their security, are they not?
Yeah, a lot of what is going on, though, in France is demagoguing. You have to bear in mind that 25% of the French public basically votes communist, and another 20% voted for Le Pen, who is an anti-Semite and a racist. So you have 45% of the French electorate that's crazy. And then of the remaining 55%, which is in some way sane, there are those who are anti-Semitic, there are those who are influenced by the money that they're getting from Iraq, there are those who are anti-American because they're Gaullist, they believe in French grandeur. So a lot of this is really Chirac playing a political game at home.
But Chirac I can't imagine that this man, Chirac, feels that Saddam Hussein is a threat to him. I just can't imagine that he does, because if Germany, France, Russia, and China would agree with us, Saddam would be already gone. The world would be a better place.
But what happened, Bill, was that in 1997, Saddam hit on a bright idea. He signed contracts with 3 countries, China, Russia, and France, and he divided all of Iraq's oil fields up among them. And he said, you can have all this oil as soon as the embargo is lifted, as soon as I'm free to give it to you. And there were sort of contingency fees. And these countries are now basically cashing in on their fees.
No,
he went around campaigning in the Security
But you got to
Council.
assume the United States has guaranteed them something if they would go along with us to make up for their financial loss. We're bribing every other country in the world to go along with us. Why wouldn't we make some deal with them that they would profit by it?
Well, the other 9 members of the Security Council are the 9 votes we need are easy to bribe. Those are small amounts of money.
Yeah, this is big.
But here
big
you're
bucks.
talking about $5 and $10 billion a year flows. You know, Iraq owes Russia $8 billion, and it owes France $6 billion.
Right, and it's paying Russia through its oil.
$15 billion for a vote like that.
Right, and it's paying Russia right now through its oil revenues, oil for food
But you know,
revenues.
that guy you had on before me makes the point that inspections are working. Well, the French admit the only reason they're working is we have 250,000 troops next door in Kuwait.
And as soon as they get withdrawn, that's the game. Everybody
and I said,
knows
are you
that.
prepared to pay for those troops? You prepared to subsidize our defense bill, keeping those guys in Kuwait so your inspections can run their course? Of course not.
No, they're not. All right, last thing. We're going to call for a boycott of all French products if the French do indeed veto the Security Council resolution.
Right.
Are they aware that thunder and lightning's going to appear over Provence pretty soon?
Well, I think that's significant, but I think the most important product the United States sends France is its tourists. France is by far the leading international destination of Americans. And if everybody doesn't follow my example, that is, you don't go to France over the summer, you'll be doing a lot better.
All right. Dick Morris, thanks very much. We appreciate it. Next on the rundown, there is anti-French legislation already in Congress. We'll tell you about that. And are we closing in on bin Laden? We'll have the latest on the hunt as the Factor continues from L.A.
Our troops. Where, when, and how? Then at 3, will a crucial victory for a new prime minister lead to crucial changes for U.S. troops in Turkey? Tonight, watch the most powerful primetime lineup on cable news, period.
Time now for the most ridiculous item of the day. All across the country, my book, The No Spin Zone, is now out in paperback. Now, I know some of you don't care, and that's understandable, but there's a point to this beside a plug. The No Spin Zone hardcover went to #1 on the New York Times bestseller list, and that drove the Times people nuts. So we'd like to drive them crazy again and get it to #1 on the paperback list. That might be ridiculous, but it's a lot of fun seeing those people jump up and down. By the way, if you want signed paperback, No Spin Zones, BillO'Reilly.com has them, okay? Flying tonight to mail, Robert Belgas, Atlanta. It's time to bring our fallen heroes from World War I and II home from France to a final resting place that will honor them. Those graves do not belong in a place that doesn't appreciate their sacrifice. Elaine Ditzler, Iowa City, Iowa. O'Reilly, as usual, your remarks strike me as juvenile. Your logic that we should boycott French products because they hurt us is wrong. French reprisals would hurt us. We are all intertwined in one global economy. Sonny Barrett, Seattle. My friends in France sent me a grassroots email a couple of weeks ago asking that all French citizens boycott anything American. Might as well. Mr. Barrett, sounds like you're throwing in with the French, and if that's the case, you might want to do some more thinking about it. Wally Semrau, Washington, Michigan. We desperately need the French military to help out in Iraq. Who better to teach the Iraqi military how to surrender? Ooh, Wally. Donald Bloom, Houston. Maybe the French government is trying to save U.S. troops from war, sickness, and death that they experienced in fighting the first Gulf War. Yeah, maybe, and I'm Mother Goose, Mr. Bloom. George Olszewski, San Diego. I think the French would be singing a different tune if Al-Qaeda had taken out the Eiffel Tower instead of the World Trade Center. John Williamson, Loudon, Tennessee. Just because the majority bullied the minority more than 100 years ago and got in God we trust on our money doesn't mean all Americans trust in God. Some U.S. citizens don't and don't want the state requiring God pledges in our schools. Hey, Mr. Williamson, what you want really doesn't matter, with all due respect. The Constitution allows the government to express spirituality, and the Constitution will rule. What do you see? Natosa Boutwell, Mannheim, Germany. Mr. O, I'm a military spouse, and I was glad to see Dennis Miller support the president's stance on Iraq. Seeing other celebrities voicing their against-war opinions has had a bad effect on our soldiers' morale. R. Giroux, Washington, D.C. Bill, during your interview with Pat Sajak, your negative comment concerning Vanna White truly reflected your hostility toward women and your sexual frustrations. Mr. Drew, you are quite possibly very much out there, but your email was so entertaining I had to read it. How about that website? Not out there at all, very to the point and pithy. Okay, www.foxnews.com/O'Reilly. Factor Gear, spring is coming. Spring's already here in L.A., 75. Got to get that Factor Gear in California. Also, if you want to weigh in on the French boycott, if you favor it, go to the website, go over to BillO'Reilly.com. We have a poll there. Also, please email us with pithy comments from anywhere in the world. O'Reilly@FoxNews.com. O'Reilly@FoxNews.com. Name in town, name in town, name in town, if you wish to opine. That is it for us today. As always, a thank you for watching The Factor. Please remember the Radio Factor, Westwood One every day. Hannity and Combs is next. Bill Bennett's on. I'm Bill O'Reilly reporting this evening from Los Angeles. We hope to see you again next time. And remember, the spin stops right here.